The courtroom smelled of old wood and desperation, a place where truth often drowned in procedure. 12-year-old Marcus Tate stood alone at the defendant's table, his small hands gripping the edge as if it could anchor him against the storm of eyes boring into him. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the gnawing in his stomach was louder than the whispers rippling through the crowd. He was here for stealing the loaf of bread from a corner store, a crime so petty it barely registered, yet so loaded it had packed the room with spectators. Marcus, a black boy from the south side of Chicago, wasn't just a defendant, he was a symbol, a lightning rod for a city fractured by race, poverty, and rage. The judge, a white man with a face carved from stone, peered down at him, his gavel poised like a guillotine. "Mr. Tate," Judge Harlan's voice boomed, "you've pleaded guilty to theft. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" The room held its breath. Marcus's eyes, wide and dark, flicked to the crowd, searching for a face he knew. There was none. His mother was working her second shift at the hospital, and his father, well, he hadn't seen him in years. "I was hungry," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a blade. "Ain't nobody was gonna feed me." A murmur swept the courtroom, some in sympathy, others in scorn. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited man named Richard Hale, leaned forward, his lips curling into something too cold to be a smile. "Hunger doesn't excuse crime," Hale snapped, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who'd never missed a meal. "This boy's actions show disregard for the law, for society's order. He needs to learn consequences." The words landed like blows, and Marcus flinched, his small frame shrinking under their weight. But across the table, his public defender, Sarah Coleman, a woman with tired eyes and a fire in her gut, stood up. She'd seen too many kids like Marcus chewed up by a system that didn't care to understand them. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "this isn't about a loaf of bread. This is about a child who hasn't eaten in days, who lives in a neighborhood where stores are boarded up and hope is scarcer than food." The crowd stirred again, louder this time. A man in the back, his skin as dark as Marcus's, shouted, "That's right. Ain't no justice for us." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder, silencing the room. "Order!" Harlan bellowed, his eyes narrowing. "Miss Coleman, you will control your client's supporters, or I'll clear this courtroom." Sarah didn't flinch. She leaned closer to Marcus, whispering, "You're not alone, kid. Just tell the truth." Marcus nodded, but his stomach growled, a sound so raw it made a woman in the front row gasp. The judge's face softened for a fraction of a second then hardened again. "Mr. Tate, explain yourself," Harlan said, his tone clipped but curious. Marcus swallowed, his throat dry as sand. He wasn't used to people listening. At school, teachers saw his color before his potential. On the streets, cops saw a threat before a child. But here, in this moment, every eye was on him, and it terrified him as much as it emboldened him. "I ain't got nobody," Marcus said, louder now, his voice cracking with emotion. "My mom works all day, all night. She tries, but we ain't got enough. The store guy, he saw me take the bread, but he didn't stop me. He just called the cops after. Like he wanted me to get caught." The room erupted. A woman yelled, "That's entrapment." Another voice, angrier, countered, "He's a thief, plain and simple." The judge slammed his gavel again, but the chaos only grew. Hale, the prosecutor, stood, his face red. "Your Honor, this is a stunt. The defendant is playing on emotions to evade justice. He's not starving's manipulative." Sarah shot back, "Manipulative? He's 12. He's hungry, not a mastermind." She turned to Marcus, her eyes fierce but kind. "Tell them what you told me, Marcus. About the store." Marcus hesitated, his heart pounding. He didn't want to sound like he was begging, but the truth was all he had. "The store guy, Mr. Callahan, he's always watchin' me when I come in. Like I'm gonna steal even if I got money. Last week, he told me, "Boy, you don't belong here." I didn't take nothin' that day, but I was so mad. Then yesterday, I was so hungry, I took the bread. The crowd's noise swelled again, a mix of outrage and empathy. A white woman in a business suit clutched her purse, her face tight with discomfort. Beside her, an older black man shook his head, muttering, "Same story, different day." The judge's eyes darted between Marcus and the crowd, sensing the powder keg he was sitting on. "Enough!" Harlan roared, his gavel a punctuation mark. "Mr. Tate, you're admitting to theft, but you're blaming the store owner for your actions. That's a dangerous precedent." His voice was stern, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in his armor. Sarah seized it. "Your Honor, Marcus isn't blaming anyone. He's explaining a reality you don't see from that bench. Callahan's store is the only one for miles in that neighborhood. He charges double what supermarkets do because he knows people have no choice. And he targets kids like Marcus, profiling them, provoking them, then calling the police when they break. This isn't just about a loaf of bread, it's about a system that sets kids up to fail." Hale scoffed, loud enough for the room to hear. "This is absurd. Are we now excusing crime because of context? What's next, letting every thief walk free because they claim they're hungry?" His words were sharp, but they didn't land as cleanly as he'd hoped. The crowd was split, their murmurs a tug-of-war between judgment and compassion. Marcus felt the weight of it all, the eyes, the words, the hunger. He wanted to disappear, to run back to the tiny apartment he shared with his mom, where at least the walls didn't judge him. But he couldn't. He was here, exposed, and the truth was his only shield. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice shaking but clear, "I ain't proud of what I did. But I ain't a criminal. I just wanted to eat." The simplicity of it, the raw honesty, hit the room like a shockwave. Even Hale paused, his next argument caught in his throat. The judge leaned back, his fingers steepled. He'd seen thousands of cases, but this one was different. Marcus wasn't just a case number, he was a child, a mirror reflecting a city's failures. Harlan's eyes scanned the room, taking in the divided crowd, the furious prosecutor, the passionate defender. Then they settled on Marcus, who stood small but unbowed, his hunger a louder accusation than any lawyer's argument. "Mr. Tate," Harlan said, his voice quieter now, "your actions have consequences, but so does the world you live in. I need to think on this." He paused, the silence heavy. "Court is adjourned for 1 hour." The gavel fell, and the room exploded into chatter. Marcus sat, his legs weak, as Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid," she whispered. But Marcus wasn't so sure. He'd told the truth, but would it matter? In a world that saw him as a problem before a person, could justice ever be fair? As the crowd filed out, some glared at Marcus, others offered small nods of support. The older black man from earlier caught his eye and mouthed, "Keep your head up." Marcus nodded back, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. But the hunger was still there, a reminder that hope alone wouldn't fill his stomach. Outside the courtroom, the city pulsed with its own tensions. News of Marcus's case had spread, fueled by social media posts, and local reporters camped outside. On X, hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" and "Bread Not Bars" trended alongside uglier ones, dripping with racial venom. Chicago was a city on edge, and Marcus, without meaning to, had become its flashpoint. Inside, Sarah was strategizing. She knew the judge's decision could go either way. Harlan was old school, fair but rigid. She'd need to push harder, to make him see Marcus not as a defendant but as a child caught in a broken system. She pulled out her phone, texting a contact at a local community group. If the courtroom wouldn't listen, maybe the city would. Meanwhile, Hale was in the hallway, speaking to a reporter. "This case is simple," he said, his voice smooth for the cameras. "A crime was committed, and justice must be served. Anything else is just noise." But even he felt the weight of the moment, the eyes of a city watching, judging. Back in the courtroom, Marcus sat alone, staring at the wooden bench where the judge's gavel rested. Someone had scratched words into it, barely visible, justice or hunger. He traced the letters with his finger, wondering who'd carved them, and whether they'd ever gotten an answer. The hour passed like a lifetime. When the court reconvened, the air was thicker, the stakes higher. Judge Harlan returned, his face unreadable. Marcus stood, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. Sarah squeezed his arm, a silent promise to fight for him. Hale adjusted his tie, ready to pounce. "Mr. Tate," Harlan began, "this court has heard your story, and it's one that challenges us all. The law is clear, but so is the reality you face. I've made my decision." The room went silent, every breath held. Marcus looked up, his eyes meeting the judge's, and in that moment, he wasn't just a boy who was a question, a challenge, a chance for something better. Judge Harlan's voice hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what was to come. Marcus Tate, a 12-year-old boy standing in a courtroom too big for his small frame, felt his heart thud against his ribs. The hunger in his stomach was a dull ache now, overshadowed by the fear of what this moment would mean for his future. The crowd leaned forward, a sea of faces split between hope and hostility, waiting for the judge to tip the scales. "I've considered the arguments from both sides," Harlan continued, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Marcus. "The prosecution argues for consequences, for the rule of law to stand firm. The defense argues for context, for a child's survival in a world that's failed him. Both have merit, but neither tells the whole story." The room stirred, a low hum of anticipation. Sarah Coleman, Marcus's public defender, gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She'd poured everything into this case, knowing it was bigger than one boy, bigger than one loaf of bread. Across from her, Richard Hale, the prosecutor, sat back, his arms crossed, confident that justice would align with his version of order. Harlan leaned forward, his voice softening but firm. "Marcus Tate, you broke the law. That's undeniable. But the law doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's meant to serve people, not punish them for the failures of others. I've reviewed your circumstances, your mother's long hours, your lack of resources, the systemic neglect of your community. These don't erase your actions, but they demand we look deeper." Marcus blinked, unsure if he was hearing hope or a prelude to punishment. The crowd was restless now, whispers turning to murmurs. A woman in the back, her face lined with years of struggle, nodded silently, her eyes locked on Marcus. Beside her, a man in a pressed suit muttered, "This is why the system's broken, excuses over accountability." "Your Honor," Hale interjected, standing swiftly, "with all due respect, this sets a dangerous precedent. If we allow poverty to excuse theft, where does it end? Vandalism? Assault? The law must be blind to circumstance, or we risk chaos." His voice was sharp, polished, but it carried a hint of desperation, as if he sensed the tide turning. Sarah was on her feet before he finished. "Your Honor, the law isn't blind if it ignores reality. Marcus didn't steal for greed or malice, he stole to survive. Punishing him without addressing why he was hungry in the first place isn't justice, it's cruelty." Her words were a plea, not just for Marcus but for every kid like him, caught in a cycle of poverty and suspicion. The judge raised a hand, silencing them both. "I've heard enough," he said, his tone final. "Marcus, this court finds you guilty of petty theft." A collective gasp rippled through the room, and Marcus's knees buckled. Sarah caught his arm, her face a mask of determination hiding her fear. But Harlan wasn't done. "However, I'm suspending your sentence, effective immediately." The courtroom exploded. Shouts of "thank you," mixed with cries of "that's outrageous." The gavel slammed, but the noise barely dimmed. Marcus looked up, confused, his eyes darting between Sarah and the judge. "What's that mean?" he whispered. "It means you're not going to jail," Sarah said softly, her voice trembling with relief. It means you get a chance. Harlan continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. Instead of detention, Marcus, you'll be placed in a community program. You'll work with mentors, attend school regularly, and report to a probation officer. You'll also meet with Mr. Callahan, the store owner, to make amends not just for the theft, but to start a conversation. This isn't a free pass. It's a responsibility. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. He didn't fully understand the legal terms, but he felt the weight of the moment, a chance to be more than a case number, more than a statistic. The crowd was still divided, some clapping, others shaking their heads. The man in the suit stormed out, muttering about soft judges. The woman in the back wiped tears from her eyes, her hands clasped in silent prayer. Hale, his face a storm of frustration, gathered his papers. Your Honor, I must object. This undermines the law's authority. But his words lacked their earlier fire. The room wasn't with him anymore. Even he could feel it. Mr. Hale, Harlan said, the law's authority comes from its ability to adapt, to see the human behind the crime. Marcus isn't a hardened criminal. He's a child who needs guidance, not a cell. The judge's eyes softened as he looked at Marcus. Son, you've got people rooting for you. Don't let them down. The gavel fell, and the case was closed, but the ripples were just beginning. As Marcus and Sarah left the courtroom, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Marcus, how do you feel? One shouted. Is this justice? Another demanded. Marcus shrank back, overwhelmed, but Sarah guided him through, her arm a shield around his shoulders. Outside, the Chicago air was crisp, the city skyline a jagged silhouette against the evening sky. Word of the ruling spread like wildfire across X, with posts ranging from heartfelt support to venomous outrage. Justice for Marcus is a win for humanity, one user wrote, while another sneered, steal bread, get a hug. What a joke. The city was a tinderbox, and Marcus's story was the spark. In the days that followed, the community program became Marcus's lifeline. His mentor, a former teacher named Jamal Wright, saw in him a spark of potential buried under years of neglect. Jamal took Marcus to the library, taught him to code, and listened when Marcus talked about his mom, his fears, his dreams. For the first time, Marcus felt seen not as a black kid from the wrong side of town, but as a person. The meeting with Mr. Callahan, the store owner, was harder. Callahan, a gruff man in his 50s, didn't hide his resentment. You cost me money, kid, he said, his arms crossed in the back room of his store. Marcus, sitting across from him, felt his stomach twist, not from hunger this time, but from shame. I'm sorry, Marcus said, his voice small but sincere. I didn't mean to hurt nobody. I was just so hungry. Callahan's face didn't soften, but his eyes flickered with something, maybe guilt, maybe recognition. Sarah, who'd insisted on being there, leaned forward. Mr. Callahan, Marcus is here to make things right. But can we talk about why he felt he had no other choice? Callahan bristled. I run a business, not a charity. Kids like him come in, always looking to take something. The word stung, but Marcus held his ground. I ain't like that, he said. You didn't even give me a chance to be different. The room went quiet. Callahan looked away, his jaw tight. After a long moment, he sighed. Maybe I didn't. But you didn't give me a chance either, kid. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. They agreed Marcus would work at the store a few hours a week, restocking shelves, learning the business. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a bridge. As weeks turned to months, Marcus's life began to shift. His mom, inspired by the community's response, joined a local advocacy group pushing for better access to food and jobs in their neighborhood. The store became a hub for change, with Callahan, grudgingly at first, hosting food drives after pressure from activists. Marcus's story had forced the city to look at itself, to confront the gaps between its laws and its people. But not everyone saw it as a victory. Some called the ruling a travesty, arguing it rewarded crime. Others saw it as a step toward justice, a recognition that a child's hunger mattered more than a store's loss. The debate raged on X, in barbershops, in churches, splitting the city along lines of race, class, and belief. Yet amid the noise, Marcus kept going: school, the store, the program, proving, day by day, that he was more than his worst moment. 1 year later, Marcus stood in front of a community center, a microphone in his hand. He was taller now, his face fuller, his eyes brighter. The room was packed with faces: his mom, Jamal, Sarah, even Callahan, who stood in the back, arms still crossed but a faint smile on his face. Marcus had been asked to speak about his journey, to share what he'd learned. "I used to think nobody cared," he said, his voice steady. "I thought the world just saw me as a problem. But that day in court, I learned something. Justice ain't just about punishment, it's about giving people a chance to be better. I got that chance, and I'm gonna keep earning it." The crowd applauded, some with tears in their eyes. Marcus's mom hugged him tight, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." The moment wasn't perfect. Chicago was still divided, still grappling with its demons, but it was a step. A boy who'd once stolen bread to survive was now a voice for change, a reminder that justice could be a bridge, not a wall. What's right, what's wrong, what's fair in a world where kids go hungry? Share your thoughts, because Marcus's story isn't just his, it's ours to answer.